John Perry, Paul Vadney,
Here.
and Paul Nordstrom.
Okay, discussion by council, vote or other action on the police station study with Tecton. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give Mr. Nordstrom the floor and just let you take it from here, sir.
Okay. I'm going to start off just by giving a quick timeline on how we got here and what our aim is tonight. Back in March of 2020, the previous town council requested an update on the police station because we were starting to wind down on actually this building. And in August of 2020, that same town council requested the Municipal Building Review Task Force develop an RFP to hire a firm to look at renovation versus a new police station on the existing site. We later found out that we really couldn't do an RFP. We had to go a different process, but it was still the same. It was request for qualifications. We developed a draft RFQ, submitted it to the town council in October 2020 to make sure it caught the essence of what they were looking for. And the town sent out the RFQ in that same timeframe, late October. In November, 3 firms submitted qualification statements. They were reviewed by a team of Gary Azowski, Dave Chamberlain, Chief Lafferty, and myself. We narrowed it down to 2 firms which were interviewed via Zoom, which was an interesting process. But based on the interviews, the task force voted to recommend that Tecton Architects do the study. That was approved by the town council in January of 2021. And then in March, so during that intervening time, we had to negotiate a contract and run everything by the town solicitor. So in March 15th, 2021, you all gave the town administrator the authority to sign the contract. We actually started the kickoff meeting on April 1st, 2020. There were 6 major tasks or phases that Tecton embarked on. On behalf of the task force, I updated the town council on the status of the project as time went on during the spring and the summer. We're now at the point where the report has been completed. You all have a final copy of the report. It's a little bit too big to send electronically, so we managed to get you the executive summary. There's lots of information in the report. So we have Jeff McElravy and Rebecca Hopkins from Tecton here to make a presentation. We're all available to answer any questions that you have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Good evening. My name is Jeff McElravy. I'm a principal with Tecton Architects. And of course, as Paul mentioned, Rebecca Hopkins, one of our project architects / managers, is with me here tonight. And we want to give you sort of a high-level overview of the report. I think if we went through it in all its detail, we'd be here for many hours. The many hours that the committee has spent, I'll step back a little here. The many hours that the committee has spent meeting with us through this process to go through all of the different components of the study and all of the information that we've provided. So with that, we have some things we want to cover tonight. Our overall goals, we want to give you an understanding of our assessment of the existing conditions. We want to talk about the programming exercise that we went through to determine the size and the square footage of the police facility that would be required to satisfy not only the current but projected future needs of the police department. When you embark on, particularly on new construction, you're building a facility that has extreme potential for life here. to imagine that this building, if you built a new building, could be standing 50 years from now, or that additions and renovations could be serving you well into the future is perfectly reasonable. So we want to make sure that that program captures at least 20 to 25 years of programmatic growth, and then has the potential for accommodating time beyond that as well. We want to review the conceptual designs, and in this case we developed two different conceptual designs, one for an addition renovation concept and one for new construction on the same site. We want to talk about the probable costs, which is our expectation of a budget for the project based upon our professional cost estimators' evaluation of our conceptual designs. That's coupled with our anticipation of all the project's soft costs and development costs. We did an evaluation of operational and maintenance costs for the two different options so that we could compare sort of the life cycle expectations for the facilities from an energy utilization standpoint. We put together some similar project comparisons of other police facility projects throughout the region. And then finally, the summary of the recommendations, both of Tecton Architects and the committee after going through this exercise. So, starting with the goals, we wanted to make sure that we did a thorough evaluation of the deficiencies throughout the buildings and grounds, which includes compliance and current public safety standards. Just a little bit about that. At Tecton Architects, we've been doing public safety facilities for about 20 years, and then I've got some extended resume beyond that, so we're looking at about 35 years of experience that we're drawing from to aid us in the evaluation and the determination of compliance with police station best practices and compliance and standards. Particularly, we pay attention to accreditation standards as well to make sure that all of the components of the facility that we're evaluating and all the components of the facilities that we design are going to be in compliance with accreditation requirements. Second, establishing the projected space needs for the department, and for that we spent a good deal of time interviewing staff at the police department, understanding what their current operations, how they work, taking a look at the facilities and understanding exactly how those operations work, so that we could write a program for space needs for a facility, not only again for today, but looking at least 20 to 25 years out into the future. Item 3 is an evaluation of the suitability of using the current site for a new police facility, and we'll show you some of the conceptual design exercises that we went through so that you can take a look at the pros and cons of different options and some of the challenges that are faced in redeveloping the site. And then, of course, 4 is taking a look at the conceptual design for the solutions. And once again, as I explained earlier, we have two different solutions that we evaluated during the study. I will say that before we got to those two different solutions, we did a lot of site test fits to look for other possibilities, other ways of utilizing the site. And then the two best ones were developed forward into conceptual floor plans so that we could really see that the capacity to support the program was there. And again, I talked a little bit about number 5, preparing an opinion of probable cost, relying on a cost estimator, and then supplementing that with projections for all the other soft costs that go along with the project. And of course, 6 was the operation and maintenance costs, which I also reviewed earlier. So a little bit about the existing conditions from a site standpoint. Right now, if we look at area number 1, that is a park, playground, a walking track at the rear of the site, which takes up, extends along the whole back of the property. And it is an impediment to future growth and development of that site. That was recently just upgraded. So it's a current asset, and at this time, we're certainly not looking to lose that asset for the community. Area number 2 is where we have an existing cell tower, and there is a right-of-way that gets us to that. The real issue there, it is on the secure side of the facility, which means that vendor access is required to get up to that tower and do maintenance, as well as the equipment room. Area number 3, we have insufficient secured storage for vehicles protected as evidence. So that's your impounded vehicles. They're sort of strewn around the back and up against the cell tower in the back of the area. There is a lot of pavement to the rear of the site, which actually turns out to be an asset for you later on as we look at the site options. Item number 4 is there's only one point of egress off the site for emergency response vehicles. Whenever we do a police facility or a public safety facility, we prefer to find 2 ways off the site, so that if it was unfortunate enough to have a traffic delay at one of the ways off the site, then you still have an option. We like those options to go to 2 separate roadways if possible, but at the very least, you're always hoping for 2 ways in and off the site. And then area number 5, that little green rectangle, we're mainly referring to the fact that you really don't have a great ingress for the detainees into the facility. The community has a custodial responsibility for the people that you take into custody, and basically that puts a burden and a liability on the community. And so whenever we're designing police facilities, we want to make sure that we're protecting the liability of the community by making it as safe a transfer from the cruiser into the prisoner processing and ultimately to the detention area. In this case, you're dropping off at the rear of the building, you're entering through the weather, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you face inside the building as well in escorting a detainee into the facility. And then finally, area number 6 is whenever we design a police facility, I guess I don't have to put too fine a point on this, but many of us in the general public get a little bit nervous about approaching a police facility. It's not always our highest expectation to have the chance and go and visit the police. Sometimes it comes with a little bit of stress and a little bit of trepidation. And so whenever we design a facility, we're looking to make it easy on the visitors to the station, that they have a clear identifiable entrance, that they know exactly where to go, and that they have a clear pathway from the parking area up to the main entry. And I can tell you myself, I've gotten there early for a few meetings, and I've sat there in my car killing the few minutes up until meeting time, and I've watched people walk up to the second doorway and pull a handle and wonder where to go and what to do. So that is a little bit of an impediment for the citizen users of this facility seeking help from the police department. But I think the bigger story here is about the condition of the building envelope. There is a document in our report prepared by our structural engineer that expresses a lot of concern about the condition of the veneer. If you see the stone sign, the Bushy School sign, it is displaced from the vertical plane of the wall by a couple inches. And the masonry joints below that are opening up. And then you see evidence of the copper cornice is pushed away from the brick, and we see cracking in a number of joints throughout the facility. It is the opinion of our engineer that likely the header courses that tie the withes of brick together, water has gotten in there and frozen and likely broken those header courses, so that the veneer is not securely attached to the backup withes anymore. And so there is concern about the stability of that exterior veneer of brick, and his recommendation is absolutely everywhere around the parapet to do repair, and in a lot of locations to rebuild that exterior veneer and get new anchors to tie the wall back together. And typically in these older buildings, you're looking at a 3-wife wall, so 3 layers of brick deep, and they're all bound together with the header courses. And in our case, it appears that outer wife is no longer bound to the inner wives. So that needs to be tied together. And I will point out that there was a previous study that we reviewed the documentation of, I think it was 2007, that had already recommended the use of helical anchors to tie these walls back together. So this has been a problem that's been going on for a little while, and the displacement is concerning. Other envelope issues, have to do with age and condition. You can see there's sort of a mismatch of window conditions going on around the facility. There's some aluminum windows that were clearly replacement windows sometime in the past. Those are outdated and no longer meet current energy standards. And then some of the other windows that have been infilled, we have some single pane windows. They're not terribly energy efficient. We do see signs of rusting on some of the lintels, which would go along with that concept of moisture infiltrating between the wides of the brick. And we have interior wood window sills on the inside where we have a lot of peeling paint, and of course we see the same thing on some walls and some ceiling locations that are indicative that moisture infiltration has occurred. When we get up on the roof, we see that at some point the rooftop units were replaced. You can see in picture number 3 where there was a larger curb that now has a smaller unit. These units are still older units, but they've been clearly replaced in the past. But you see some deterioration in the gravel and in the roof conditions. Around the hatch, sorry, I'm indicating that in number 3, but around the roof hatch there, you can see a fair amount of deterioration in the flashings around that. That occurs at a lot of the penetrations. I leaned over where that bushy school sign is, and you can see a lot of deteriorations in the flashing and the caps along the edge there. And you can actually see the displacement in the brick veneer pretty well from that location. So, we're potentially looking at the need for re-roofing. We're looking at replacement windows. We're looking at masonry repairs. So there's a lot of work required on the exterior envelope of the facility. And once again, getting on the inside, I mentioned that we do see signs of deterioration and infiltration from water. On the inside, in some cases, it just results in the peeling paint that you see in the one image. In the big background image, that is likely a combination of not only water infiltrating the masonry, but also site water up against the back wall. So you see some pretty serious paint peeling on that wall as a result of all that infiltration. You see some big water stains on ceilings. You see the wood fiber tile in what is now the fitness room is delaminating. So we've got a lot of indication of moisture infiltrating the building in the past. We also see a variety of worn finishes throughout the building. There's one image of the chair underneath the dispatch desk where a previous reflooring took place, but now that is wearing through. We see some some door sills, wooden door sills that are deteriorating. We see indications of vinyl tile over wood flooring where the joints are cracking and the tile is cracking. And then down in the lower left corner, we see some 8x8 tiles, which may indicate the presence of, yes, sir.
Is the air quality okay in the fitness room?
Is the air quality okay? Throughout the building, there is some sign of, again, moisture infiltration that could result in mold buildup. We did not do specific testing to verify whether that's present. The last one I was talking about was the lower left is probably or possibly the presence of asbestos-containing materials in that 8x8 tile. Okay, as we go into some of the prisoner handling areas, the image in the middle is the youth holding facility. We are always concerned, once again, about the custodial responsibility. Open benches beneath in a detention area, wire mesh are always concerns for us in these kinds of areas. When a door to a detention area swings in, there is the possibility of barricading or at the very least, trying to hold the door closed to create aggravation for the officers. So that is always a concern. You can see up in the upper right-hand corner, I talked about how you're entering in, particularly in the wintertime, you're getting out of a cruiser, escorting a prisoner through the outside in the snow, the rain, the ice. But then you enter the building and you come down a steep interior ramp, which exceeds the ADA slope for a ramp. And that can be a little bit treacherous. If anybody slips on that, that's a point of liability. And then I think in general, we see detention facilities that are older, and they don't have the kinds of provisions that we normally look for in terms of prevention of self-harm. It is unfortunate that many detainees in the first 24 hours after apprehension, they feel like they're, it's a big blow to their psyche, and there's a lot more attempts of self-harm during that period. So trying to create a safe environment for the officers to maintain that custodial responsibility is really important. Another thing is your cells are all side by side. They are not contained in separate cell blocks, so we don't have sight sound isolation. So if two combatant detainees are side by side, they can continue yelling and screaming. If you have male, female, or detainees at the same time, then they are exposed to whatever yelling and screaming goes on between that. That's not an ideal condition, and certainly accreditation standards recommend that you isolate those blocks from one another. All right, so some of the key takeaways, as the police facility stands, it no longer suits the needs of the department. And of course, I've outlined some of the challenges that the building itself faces. We have some programmatic separation issues, particularly with the detention area. We have some challenges with building and site security, functionality of some of the spaces. Certainly ADA accessibility is a significant issue in the building. We didn't outline, but you walk in the front door and the first thing you're faced with is an up and down stair. And then that continues because there are several levels throughout the building that are not properly connected with either ramps or elevators. So ADA accessibility throughout the building is challenged. There's concerns about officer health and safety, with some of the conditions that we're facing with the moisture infiltration and potentially hazardous materials. There's some building code issues that should be addressed, and certainly some efficiency issues that need to be addressed. And interior environmental quality, because of a lot of that moisture infiltration is challenged. And then again, the prisoner health and safety, which translates into the custodial responsibility for the town, should be addressed as well. So we did do a quick evaluation after we completed our programmatic exercise, and just so you understand, there's 29% of our building program is comprised of office or sort of people space. 44% of it we call our mission critical space. Those are the areas that make a police facility and separate it from an office building or any other kind of type of function. And that includes vehicle space and detainee space, and evidentiary storage, all of the things, like I said, that make a police station a police station. And then the last 27% is your building anatomy. That's your net to gross area. That's your hallways, your circulation, your wall thicknesses, your mechanical spaces. These numbers are pretty typical of what we see for police stations. We've been reviewing these for some time to make sure that we see consistency and can compare one police station design to another. So these numbers are pretty much on target for what we normally see. We did go through an exercise where we evaluated the site needs of the program, and this document basically tells us that if we were going to build on a brand new clean site, that we would need about 1.78 acres of usable constructible area to accommodate the site program. And the site program includes everything from the building footprint itself to all of the parking needs for visitor and handicap parking, for staff parking, for cruiser parking, the travel lane allowances, all the site utilities, and the amenities, in this case, the vehicle impound lot, and then some green space and setbacks. So again, estimating that you would require 1.78 acres to satisfy the program. We did go through the whole programmatic needs of the facility, and those are broken down into a lot of different sections, and you can see some of them highlighted on the 3 sheets illustrated above. The public areas, which is, you know, the public lobby and restrooms, access to an interview space, as well as you know, the interior vestibule. We have training community space. In your case, the community training room is also set up to serve as the municipal court. So it's larger than it would normally have been for just police function itself. It can handle the peak loads of the municipal court. So we've got those functions as well as some storage and kitchenette space to support that. We have some municipal court facilities, which is the staff office and the judges' chambers. We have the dispatch center itself, and we program those to be compliant with NFPA standards for emergency communications centers receiving calls from the public, which calls for a specific level of protection against fire protection as well as security. We have a records bureau, which houses all the records that the department retains, department administrative offices, in the investigative space, property and evidence storage, again, looking to fulfill accreditation standards for those requirements. All of our patrol facilities, we have our department firearms, which is our armory and weapons cleaning space, and our storage areas, and then staff facilities, all of the prisoner processing areas, the detention facilities, and then the garage and storage. And then the last 2 sections are vertical circulation and the building services, which are mechanical, electrical spaces. It was not a part of our study to evaluate alternate sites, but we did have conversations with the police department about the location of the existing site within the community. And the chief has indicated to us that the facility, in his opinion, is located in an optimal location for the high volume call area. So a lot of the calls for service are proximate to this site location, which makes it a great area for responding and putting a presence, police facility presence in an area where most of your call volume comes from. All right, so now we're going to take our first look at the conceptual designs. This proposal is for the addition renovation. So the idea here is that we are going to retain the existing building and renovate it so that we can utilize that space. And then we did actually end up doing 2 additions to try to solve some of the programmatic issues. Right now your building is about just shy of 15,000 square feet. The program resulted in a need of 21,688. So we're a little bit shy of the programmatic need from a square footage standing from the existing building. But one of the things that I will tell you is about existing buildings, and particularly ones that are schools, they're not as the most efficient buildings to design a police station into. In particular, among other things, is the widened hallways. They eat up additional square footage in the circulation category that isn't necessarily what we would have done if it was a purpose-built construction. So our first challenge in looking at this site was trying to identify how do we handle the vertical circulation. We wanted to address the public access to the building, and you can see up at the upper right of the page where addition 1 is, and there's Rebecca's going to give me a movement there of the mouse. That is our main public entry. What we did is we created a lobby space there and located the dispatch center so that they could be the first point of reception to the public. We are locating an elevator in there so that you can get to the different split levels that occur. The back of the dispatch area has a half stair that feeds down to the lower level of the department, and then another stair that connects us back up to the main level of the department. Then we renovated the space on the 2 floors inside. And then addition 2 primarily satisfies our detention cell block areas and our vehicle maintenance and vehicle processing facility areas. So those are things that are best on grade. We never want to take detainees up and down stairs or in elevators if we can avoid it. It's risky. We want to bring them into a proper sally port and then into that detention area. And because it is an institutional occupancy, it requires a fire separation from the existing building, from the rest of the building, the business portion of it. So putting that area on grade at the back of the building really helps us to resolve some of those fire rating issues. So the entrance, again, just opposite that main entry of the building, up at the top of the site there, gives us access from Smithfield Road. We've got some parallel parking along the front of the building, and then that feeds us down into a larger public parking lot. We still have to walk around the building to get to that main entry, but we're hoping that through the architecture we can create a clearer understanding of where that main entry is so that there isn't confusion. We end up with just about 35 spaces. Our municipal court can actually seat more than that. At full capacity, if everybody drove their own car, this parking lot would be pretty full. If you swing around through that public parking lot onto Merrimack Street, a little bit further to the left, you'll see the access into the police portion of the lot. You come in, off to the right is access into the sally port. The cruiser parking wraps all around the back of the building, and then up at the back corner next to our antenna tower is our location for the impound lot. Everything to the left of that parking lot is, of course, that existing park with the walking track. I will note that this scheme suffers from one of the comments I made about the existing site plan, that all of the cruisers still exit out onto Merrimack Street. So they still only have one way back out to Smithfield Road. From a plus standpoint, we're reusing an asset that you've already got. We get a modest cost savings overall from this solution, as you'll see later on. And, from an environmental standpoint, by reusing a building, we're reducing, our waste on the project. On the from the negative standpoint, we've got significant envelope restoration and repair. We've got challenges with all of those internal levels. In fact, aside from the elevator response at the front of the building, we still had to put in ramps to solve some of the half levels. I mentioned the one-way access, and then we're not quite at the number of parking spaces we'd like to be for supporting the municipal court. And then the police department did express a lot of concern that with the dispatch at that half level down, that it isolates it from a lot of the other functions, particularly the patrol functions. And that represents a little bit of a concern from a day-to-day operations standpoint. And then the big one here is that this facility, because of the extent of the renovations and the additions that are proposed here, we would require temporary facilities during construction. We have assumed the use of some temporary mobile office space, and then relying on some mutual aid for detention. There is some costs associated that are included in our estimate. We tried to be as comprehensive as possible and not just think about the cost of addition renovation, but the cost of the entire execution of the project. We do have allowance for remediation costs of some of those hazardous materials that I pointed out may be present, as well as all of the re-roofing and the envelope repairs that I talked about earlier. So that's that site plan. This is a little bit difficult to see, so I'm just going to try to give you the general flow of it, but up in the upper right is our main entry with our dispatch area. The elevator is straight in off the lobby. That brings you downstairs to a mid-level, and then we have a ramp that drops you down to where the male locker room and then the fitness room is in the back corner. Also from that half level, we have access to the women's locker room, which is in the other part of the basement. Continuing down the page through that hallway, we have our patrol facilities and our evidentiary storage down at the front of the building. There we go. And our roll call and report prep down in the lower right. And then we head back. Our mechanical, electrical room still exist in the middle of the building where they currently do, although we tucked the armory into where the current men's locker room is. We do come out the back. We have to address that ramp that's too steep, so we flatten that out and then have to continue up to get up to grade with a longer ramp. And then the big block, the rectangle at the lower left, it comprises all of our cell blocks as well as our sally ports. So we have a 2-bay vehicle sally port so cruisers can enter, secure the doors, secure the weapons, and bring detainees into the facility in a safe environment. And then just above the cell block are our vehicle maintenance and processing bays. One of these bays is routine maintenance for the cruisers. The other one is if you have a vehicle that's involved in a crime and you have to process it for evidentiary reasons. This is a space not only to secure it, but to conduct that vehicle processing. Up on the upper floor, again, if you go back to the elevator, there we go. You come up the half level. We have a secure public space on this upper level with a hallway that runs to the back where we create that municipal court / training room. We also have our public interview space, and public toilets are located at this level. And then if you head back, you get access to our records bureau, and then there's a secure entry point that will bring you into the department administration, the investigative bureau, and then our patrol supervisors' offices. So again, the challenges from the police department standpoint are that half level for dispatch, the fact that our supervisory offices are upstairs, they're directly over our patrol functions below. And then the need for all of that excess vertical circulation in the form of ramps. You know, we could have solved that with a second elevator, but those of you who understand facilities maintenance know that a second elevator is a cost gift that just keeps on giving. You know, there's maintenance and inspections and all of that, which are quite expensive for elevators. So this is a rendering of what this might look like, and you can see that we create an identifiable main entry over to the right of the image, and then complete the restoration of the existing building, trying to respect the historic character of the building and restore it as much as possible to its original aesthetic. And then, you know, the new addition complements with a little bit grander entry element to identify that public entry. Oh, did we go too fast for you there with that camera? Here's another view. This is that entry drive that comes in up at the upper end of the site from where we were looking at. So you come right in looking at that main entry point. The parallel parking is off to the left where those pedestrians are walking by. You can still see that cell tower back in behind our addition, back along the property edge. All right, so now we're going to look at the second option. And one of the big things that we talked about here is number, yes, I'm sorry.
So on the last one, where would any handicap parking be? Where would the handicap parking?
Can you take me back to the site plan, please? So we have a couple striped out handicap spaces. Also we can actually get some closer to the front door. I see we've got some, but our parallel parking can also be handicap accessible, and we can have a curb cut there.
Jeff?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, so you're talking about potential Merrimack Street being blocked up on Smithfield Road. It kind of follows up on Council Allen's question about parallel handicap parking. Would that not be an emergency exit or entry? Is it going to be wide enough to facilitate if cars are parked there? Can vehicles come in and out through the public parking space up heading north towards Smithfield Road?
Yeah, that whole driveway is wide enough for a two-way vehicle flow. We just didn't have quite enough depth in there to get a perpendicular parking along the front, so we retained just the parallel parking for that quick drop-off and access to the building.
So if I was still on the additional renovation, may I ask another question? It pertains to, it's difficult to see, as you said, but there were two bays. One was for processing potential crime vehicles, and the other one was for maintenance of
That's correct.
Currently, the town does maintenance of police vehicles at the highway barn. And I was just curious, how, you know, if we're looking at costs, if they were to be maintained at that building, would we have to hire another mechanic?
No, these are very small, maintenance, like headlights, windshield wipers, and whatnot, stuff like that.
And who would perform those
We
maintenance?
do.
The individual officers?
Sure.
Okay,
Our
thank you.
maintenance, like Detective Steve Donner, if he's not there to do it, you know, a lot of the guys know how to do it.
All right,
Mine, that.
okay, thanks.
Any other questions while we're on that one before we start in the other scheme? All right, so this is the new construction option, and what we wanted to do here is try our best to make it such that the existing facility could be operated during construction so that we didn't have to do a temporary facility. And we're close to that. There will be a couple little challenges for continuing operation. Our prisoner access right now is through the back of the building, as I pointed out, with that green rectangle earlier. So we've talked about other options for bringing detainees in during the construction period with the police department. But that gray area is the footprint of the existing building. And Rebecca, if you could just show us roughly where that prisoner entry currently is, right back there. So during the construction, we will have to reroute to either the other access point or over at the end access point at the bottom of the existing building image there. So in this case, you see that there's a more centralized access point with a perpendicular entry road that is wide. It's meets the capacity for two-way traffic. We extend our public parking area all the way across the front of the site, and we get upwards of 41 public spaces in there, so we get more public parking to support the municipal court function in this solution. If you continue from the drive, you eventually come to a gate that allows access to the rear secure portion of the parking, and you'll have your police parking. There's a lot that jogs up above that has some additional, whoops, other side, right there, that has additional staff parking, and then of course the impound lot Rebecca was showing us just a minute ago, right there. The antenna sits between those two lots. In this case, you come back, you've got access out through that gate. You can go back out the main drive that you came in, or continue down through the public lot and get out to Merrimack Street. Oh, no, over here. Out to Merrimack Street. So you do have two ways off the site. They're two different roads. Admittedly, I would love to have them further apart, but we do have the ability to access from two different locations. If we sweep in on Merrimack Road, we can come to the back of the site and have access directly to the Sally Port. So cruisers can come in, go into the Sally Port, offload any detainees, and then they can flow back into the parking lot for the secure side of the building. Our public entry is down in the lower right-hand corner of the new building footprint. There you go. And you can see, we'll show you that in the building elevation here shortly. We do have a couple access points on the secure side. There's a staff entry point as well as access to some storage space, and then a rear staff entry point as well. So pros and cons, we meet a lot more of the standards for access. We get two ways in and off the site. We can do an efficient two-story stacked envelope. When you keep your floor plates even, you end up with the most efficient building envelope. We can continue operations during construction with a little bit of adjustment to some of the flows to accommodate the construction on site. We have a clear path and identifiable main entry. We get a good drive-through Sally Port that connects back into the secure area. We have our dispatch is in the right place to be connected to the patrol functions inside the facility. We've got better space adjacencies overall, and we do a better job of meeting the parking requirement for the municipal court. I do want to point out, up in the blue there are still a couple challenges. With all of the development of the site, This is going to be a tight site during construction. I just did another project in another community up in Massachusetts where we had to deal with similar site constraints, and it does require a little bit more coordination on the contractor's part to make sure that materials arrive on site as needed, because you don't have a lot of laydown area to stockpile construction materials. The one big challenge here is we will have to find a location for some temporary off-site parking, because with all of the construction operations, we're just not going to be able to support all of the staff and cruiser parking. And we have discussed some possible options with the police chief, so we're hopeful that we can work out something that would allow us to continue operations with an off-site location. There will be a little bit of additional construction time because you're going to build the new building, move in, and then go back and demolish the old building, and then finish all your site work development. So, you know, rather than building everything all at once, you've got to do it in steps. So that adds a little bit to the construction time. We were asked just to sort of address what's the possibility for future growth. And I do want to point out, through our programming exercise, we included growth inside the building. There are places where we have additional space for future needs, and you know, certainly from a locker standpoint and a patrol standpoint, we've accommodated some future growth in the building. So the idea that you may have to expand the footprint is a ways off into the future, but you know, things can change over time. So possibilities involve the relocation or the replacement or the removal of that park asset, which is indicated in area number 1. It could be possible to relocate the municipal court at some point and repurpose some of that space, or to consider acquisition of adjacent parcels. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Back when they were rebuilding, building a new state police headquarters for Rhode Island, what they did was they put double wides, right? And they put everybody in double wide, so that way they could knock down the old building and be building the new building at the same time, and that saved a lot of time.
It would absolutely save time, but you know, obviously you have the cost of the rental of those units. You know, we didn't price this one using the temporary facility, but we could easily adjust that and figure that out.
I mean, the cost might outweigh, I mean, you might save money in the long run, right? Because now you're moving the project along a little faster.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
I'm not telling you your job, it's more of a question than, you know.
Yeah. My gut is they're going to kind of balance each other, because the cost of the rental for those temporary facilities for that extended time, you're going to have to locate them, you know, off-site. So you have to have a place to house that for the interim. Make sure that you have access to utilities. You are, however, going to save on the general conditions because the contractor, for all the time his trailer's there and his staff there, you know, that has a cost as well. So we could take a look at it. My gut says it's going to balance out. I don't think you're going to see a huge advantage, but I'm happy to run the numbers.
Yeah, well, if it balances out, then and you get it done quicker, then it's a win, right?
Yeah. Well,
I'm just asking, that's all.
sure, yeah.
Thanks.
You bet. All right, so quickly from a floor plan standpoint, the main entry, Rebecca, point to that for me, please. There we go. You have entrance through a vestibule into the lobby that has immediate access to the dispatch center. Dispatch center is supported by its break area and restroom. We have the elevator off the lobby and a stairway that feeds upstairs, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we get upstairs. We do have a public interview space directly off the lobby, so that if, you know, for instance, you're coming to file a complaint or express concern, maybe of a sensitive nature, then an officer can take you out of that lobby space so you can have a confidential conversation. Heading through that secure access door, we get into the patrol area where we have our sergeant's office, our roll call area, our lieutenants. We have all of that right proximate to that staff entry point. I'm sorry, and our report writing room is just up the opposite hall. So all of those patrol functions are close by. We do have some storage functions along the hallway going left-right. We have our traffic storage and bulk property storage. That's for when they bring in bigger items, whether it be bicycles or I just heard somebody tell me today that they had a canoe in their bulk property storage, so all sorts of things can end up in that space. We continue on down the hall below the storage rooms. We have our weapons cleaning and armory, our long gun storage are all in that area. If we wrap around, we come back to our evidence processing, receiving and processing area, which are located directly opposite the cell block and internal to the building. So over in the lower left, our whole cell block with our detention cells and our processing area, our interview room, and then of course our access from the two-bay sally port over to the far left. Heading up above that detention area, you've got your mechanical room, there we go. And then the vehicle, a storage bay as well as the processing bay. Maintenance and storage, I'm sorry. If we head upstairs, once again, a lot of times what we like to do when we design police facilities is try to keep all of the public space on one floor. And if the site was a bigger site, that might have been a possibility here to explore. But because we were limited in the amount of area for the footprint of the building, in order to get a stacked floor plate, we decided that it was going to be necessary to get that municipal court up above, similar to what we did in the addition renovation solution. So you come up the stair and elevator in the lower right-hand corner. You have access to the records office, which is also your court clerk's office. And then you have access into the municipal court at that higher level. And then there's public restrooms. There's sort of a gallery space that leads on to an egress space right there. Just to note that this room is set up so that you can have public access when it's being used as a court space. When it's being used as a training room, you can secure those double doors to the public gallery, and police officers can access it from the rear corridor and use it for training. Vice versa, if it's being used for public space, then you secure that rear door and leave the public doors open. So if we head past the records office and slide back, we get our administrative suite up in the upper right-hand corner. Wrapping around, we get our judge's chamber in behind the municipal court. We get our staff break room next to the judge's chamber. And then continuing on the hall, we get our detective bureau, and then all of our locker rooms, male and female locker rooms, and access to the fitness room down at the lower corner of the plan. So again, it's a stacked floor plate. The upper level, right up here, right up there, that area is open to below. That's our vehicle processing bay, so we do have room so that if they have to lift the vehicle that they're processing, we have the headroom for it. So that one is open to below. And here's a potential rendering of the outside of this facility. You can see that identifiable entrance with the signage and the big gable, so people know where to go. There is a little move back right where the cursor is, just above that. We explored the possibility of retaining some of those copper cornices to pay homage to the Bushy School on the site, maybe use them as ornamentation on the building. The gallery runs along the left-hand side just above that copper detail. That's where the municipal court area, public access to the municipal court is. And of course the gable to the far left is where that fitness room is up above. If we go back to the right of the entry, our patrol offices are down below, and our administrative offices are up above. You can still see the antenna or the cell tower off in the back edge of the site there. And there's a view from the other angle out near Smithfield Road. In this point of view, you can see the staff entry on the side, actually both staff entries on the side of the building. All right, so now to the cost part. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the market here in a minute, so I'm going to sort of boil down to the gist of this here. Up at the upper portion of the sheet is our calculations for our construction costs. So this is the actual cost of construction without all of the soft costs that go into making a full project cost. And right now, with design estimating, contingency, and escalation, as well as all the hard construction cost estimates from our estimators. We are looking at a construction cost for the building at about $14,200,000. So that would be the number that we would want to see on bid day. Below that are all the project development and equipment costs. So you have a line for professional design fees for clerk of the works. You have a budget for interior furnishings and loose equipment. Furnishings and loose equipment. We have costs for survey and boring evaluations, materials testing, because during construction you do have to test a lot of the materials. Certainly concrete and masonry are some of the key ones, but structural steel welds and all of that need to be inspected and tested during construction. And then we have a line for bidding expenses, which are necessary as you go through the public bidding of the process. And then that last section down near the bottom there are two contingencies down there. There's a construction contingency. That's sort of the owner's contingency. We are carrying 10%, which is, I'm sorry, 6%, I'm sorry. 6%, which is just slightly higher than we normally do, but this is the addition renovation proposals, so we wanted to up that number just a little bit in case there's any unforeseens that are involved in the construction. The line under that is our project development contingency. That's basically a contingency on the lower part of the sheet because those are not actual quotes. They're not. Those are estimates based on previous experience. So we do put a little contingency in case there's any deviation in that. So in this scenario, you end up with a total project cost of about $17,500,000. I do want to note here that the space needs indicated that a 21,688 square foot building was anticipated. The ad reno ends up coming to about 23,000 based on the conceptual design. A lot of that has to do with the excess circulation space that we had to put in to deal with all of the different floor levels and to work around the existing building. So existing building fitting the program in is a little less efficient than purpose-built construction. So now for the estimate for the new construction. Again, we're looking at the construction costs up at the top. I'm sorry, I can't read the number. $15.2 million for the construction cost at the top of the sheet. And then a grand total down at the bottom with all of the soft costs and the contingencies at about $18 million, $18.3 million. So at the end of the day, a little bit more than the addition renovation costs. We wanted to point out that should you do the new construction option, then that hazardous material abatement on the existing facility is still required. And likewise, that may be something that you do even if if you do the ad reno, then the hazardous material is also required. So it's required either way. So we end up with a delta, a difference of about 526 square feet, and a construction cost delta of about $800,000 between the two. So I do want to talk a little bit about something that's been going on in the marketplace right now. These numbers are a little bit higher than some of the costs that we've seen over the last few years. And that's because of the impact of the pandemic. The chart here is the Turner Construction's construction cost index. It shows, since 2008, sort of the rate of escalation of construction costs. So we had a bit of a recession right after 2008. You saw that the cost went down. It was a great time to build because it was one of the few times we actually saw a decrease in construction costs. Since that time, they've been increasing. They were getting pretty aggressive at the rate. And then 2018, 2019, that rate started to flatten out a little bit. But since about January, December, January of last year, we have seen some pretty big spikes in construction costs. I don't know where that's going to go in the future because I don't have that kind of a crystal ball. But a lot of that has to do with some of the supply chain disruptions. We were in design on a police facility up in Massachusetts. In February, we were advised by our construction manager, who was a construction manager at Risk Project, that bar joists had a lead time in excess of a year. So we switched to solid steel instead of bar joist on that project, and were able to avoid a major delay on that project. But we've also kept abreast with our construction manager about some other material delays and cost impact, and worked with them to look for solutions to maintain that. We just received the final numbers for that project in August, and we're very pleased that even though we developed the budget prior to the pandemic influence, that we still managed to bring that project in on budget. But I think the indication that I would give here is that we need to continue to watch what's going on with the marketplace. It is possible that restoration of supply chains may see some numbers at least escalate at a slower rate, if not maybe come back to renormalize. We've certainly seen already reports of lumber costs coming down somewhat from their high. So it's a little bit of volatile time to be predicting construction costs. We have been very careful and spent a lot of time in dialogue with the estimators to make sure that you would be protected with the estimate numbers that we put forward here.
I have a question. Your estimate numbers, when is the estimated date of construction to start?
Can you give me that? I think we had it next.
2023, I believe.
23?
I think
Yeah.
it's, midpoint, so 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Really quickly, our engineers took a look at annual operating costs. They're looking at maintenance as well as fuel consumption costs here, and anticipating that for addition renovation, total annual operating costs would be about $85,500. For the new construction, you'd be looking at $52,250. So you get about a $33,000 a year savings in those costs, which over time can add up to certainly the delta in the project. It's probably 20-year time frame before you see real payback, but it is a savings in operation annually. And just a comparison, we gathered a bunch of other police station projects throughout the region, and when I say region, I think we went beyond Rhode Island to some of the up into Massachusetts as well. And from a cost standpoint basis, you might notice in the column left of the dashed line that a dollar per square foot basis, the number's pretty high, and that's because that's what we're seeing with the market these days. But if you go over to the right of the dashed line, where we've brought all of those, or escalated all of those construction costs up to current dollars, we find that we're sitting a little bit right about in the middle of the costs, with some projects coming in higher, some coming in lower. And there's always deviations, in site costs, and some of these don't have to demolish a building on the same site. So I would expect some deviations to be accounted for because of those issues as well. In short, after looking at all of the pros and cons of the two options, although it is somewhat more expensive to do the new construction option, operationally, when we looked at our pros and cons, Tecton feels that the advantage of the new construction from a programmatic and functional standpoint, from a building envelope standpoint, from the position of giving the community a brand new building that is in full compliance with the current building codes. And I think I failed to mention this before, but because your existing building is a police station, you get a little bit of grandfathering from the building code perspective. And so even though that structure of the Bushy School would not meet the standard for new construction for a police facility, the code will allow you to continue its use as such. The new construction would be in full compliance of the current code. And the important thing about that is, from a resiliency standpoint, the codes have changed a lot, and emergency services buildings are actually required to meet a higher standard than other types of buildings, because they're the buildings that are expecting to be up and operational during the worst of times. So you would get a much more resilient building in the long run with new construction as well. And for the amount of money, it was our recommendation that you should consider the new construction option. This recommendation and all the discussions were also had with the building, the committee as well, and I believe that they've echoed that recommendation to this council. So that was a lot of information, I realize, but I think we're happy to entertain any other questions or concerns or thoughts.
Talk a little bit about that. What difference in the cost per square foot for public safety versus
Paul is asking me to have a discussion about the differences in cost per square foot for police facilities versus other buildings like a town hall or a school. And I think I just mentioned one of them is that increased standard, but certainly the technology that goes into these buildings, supporting your emergency communications system and making sure that it's protected in accordance with best practice standards. There's a cost for that. There's ballistic resistance associated with that, as well as fire protection. The detention handling areas, the prisoner areas of the facility. Cell construction is costly. Detention cell fronts are costly. The plumbing fixtures are costly. And there's a lot of reasons of that, because it is, again, all of these have to be safe and respect that custodial responsibility of the community. So really, dispatch and the detention areas are your two big cost drivers, aside from the increased responsibility of the building to be more resilient from a building codes perspective.
So the process then would be, we would still go out to bid, so it could come out less than what you're estimating. Could
Yes,
come out
it
more too, but it could come out less.
Yes, it could. I mean, it would, certainly I would, as you go through the process, you need to manage your budget every step of the way, so that you can avoid the more scenario. We've had a good track record with that, so I would encourage you to make sure that whoever does carry forward on the design of this building understands that responsibility and appraise the community of anything that would alter the conditions beyond the budget. But yes, we've had some pretty good success recently. We had a couple projects that came in just prior to the pandemic that were almost $1 million low. And then we bid one that was almost $3 million low. So it is possible. As I said, that Massachusetts one that we just bid came in, I think it was $300,000 under the budget, which was, pretty good performance considering the impact of the pandemic.
Can you go back to the slide with the other communities, the buildings? So now, did you handle any of these other communities? Were you the architect for any of these communities?
Yes, there's a number of them. Sutton Police in Massachusetts, Wilbraham Police, Wilton in Connecticut, Westport, let's see, Lexington, Charlton, Shrewsbury, and Auburn. Auburn, I will caveat that is based on a study right now, so that's not a final construction cost.
So some of these areas, their construction cost was a lot less. Is it because they had a lot less amenities in their buildings, or are they, because they're kind of similar in size? I'm just wondering Because there's quite a bit of extras in this building that are above and beyond. You know, when you look at the judges' chambers and all these different
Absolutely.
offices and
None of these,
facilities and.
well, none of the buildings that I worked on have a municipal court. They
Mhm.
do have a training room, a community training room, which is smaller than the municipal court and doesn't have the judge's space. Many of these buildings don't have to demolish and abate an existing building. They don't have to account for construction on a site with an existing police operation. So those can be cost drivers as well.
So these communities, what they do with their existing, that was a different property and they sold it? Or?
In some of them, yes. For instance, I will sell, Wilbraham, Massachusetts was one that I did. We had done the fire station a few years back. They had property right next door. We built a brand-new police station on that site and moved the police department, and then the old building, I believe now, is their town IT. And I think there's a number of them. Westport, Massachusetts, also new construction on a site next to a fire station. So no demolition, no abatement. They had plenty of room to work on the building. I will point out Lexington Police down there. You know, that is that's another very constrained site with a building that has to be demolished, and a historic house that has to be moved. So you can see it's up on the upper end too.
Now, what about the Portsmouth Police Department? They demolished or they reconstructed around the same building, didn't they?
In an existing building that they built in front of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think another thing to note about a lot of these numbers is one risk in looking at cost per square foot analysis is you don't necessarily know if all the numbers are equal, if all of those site costs were in there, if they kind of funded the project in separate chunks. So a lot of these, we did as much research as possible from public records on what the perceived construction cost would be, and also trying to capture some of the added costs that potentially took place during construction to really get a sense of that total project cost.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in each case you probably have slight variation, whether maybe there was a pretty flat, clean, green site where they could just kind of build and there was not a lot of cost there, and then with some that have like a demolition included.
Yeah, because you're talking like it's $5 million difference there. It's the same size building. You know.
Does anyone have any questions for the chief? Because the chief, you have to be at another meeting, right? Another appointment? Okay. Anybody have any questions for the chief before he takes off? Thanks.
I have a question to pose. I think it may have been answered by someone just doing it. So when I was doing square footage, as you were going through the slides, so the renovation, $749.34. Now, we get per square foot. We get to the back when you do the comparisons. You don't include the soft costs and engineering, and you come up with a much less number times 22,000 square feet. So is that the norm for the architectural world, where you don't include, when you say cost per square foot, as a taxpayer, I want to know exactly how much per square foot. So, my math, I think, is correct, $749.34. Yet at the end, what I just had out there, was $687. So there's a lot missing there, not missing. I guess in the architectural world, this is how it's done, but as a layperson, I would like to see the final number per square foot.
Yeah, particularly for projects that we didn't work on, getting all of those numbers reassembled is difficult. Yes, you're correct. Oftentimes in the architectural world, we talk about cost per square foot on the construction cost, as opposed to the total project cost. I learned a long time ago, though, that you always project out the entire total construction cost when we're talking about funding from a community. I had
So if I, please correct me if my math is off, I'm doing it horribly bad. So for the renovation, I come up with $749.34, but if it's new, it's $823 a square foot with less square foot. I understand we've got abatements, we've got asbestos, all this other stuff, and new regulations to abide by, but if someone could just verify that that actually would be projected
Yep.
Yep.
And again, you know, we are salvaging the existing building. We're not getting the value of the salvaging as we would if it was in great condition. Plus demo, yeah. Yeah, so.
Let's just talk about what everybody's thinking when that page came up. That's a boatload of money, you know, and I just don't know how that's gonna fly with the voters,
Well, let me give you an answer to that.
okay?
We've looked at this, okay? Number one, it's a conceptual plan. It's not cast in stone, it's an idea right now. And that number can change up or down based on what we want in that building. They've done a review, they've met with the chief and his staff. We had no input in that. We didn't want any input in that from our committee side. We didn't want any input in that. That was the chief saying, this is what I need to operate a police department. Him and his men, this is what we need. Can we go in there and say, hey, do we really need this space? Do we need that space? We can lower the square footage and get a different number. But yeah, 17 million, 18 million is a big number. But let's look at the big picture now, okay? If you want to pursue either one of those plans, I've had discussions with the finance director and the administrator on this to get numbers. For every $11,000 that we spend is 1 cent on the tax levy in today's conditions, assuming no new growth. We need to make assumptions going forward with this. I've also had the finance director talk to our advisors, PFM financial advisors, for different amounts, and they calculated what the debt service schedule would be. And I had them look at 15 million for 15 years, 16 million for 20 years, 18 million for 20 years, and 20 million for 20 years. Should we want to do something else in that, you know, to roll something else into a bond question at the same time? And the potential tax impact for each of those would be as follows. If we borrowed 15 million for 15 years, it would be approximately $112 per thousand on the tax rate. If we borrowed 16 million for 20 years, it would be $97.73 per thousand. If we borrowed 18 million for 20 years, it would be about $110 per thousand. And 20 million for 20 years would be about $122.27 per thousand. But you can't just look at it in that little time capsule, because we already control debt in the town. And so when you look at those numbers and you assume that we move forward with either one of those to proceed with it, and the bonding is done in 2023 or 2024, the above tax impacts would be greatly reduced by the fact that the town will be retiring approximately $10.9 million in 2026. So if you borrow 18 million, almost 11 million of that is going to be absorbed by just retiring debt. And in 2028, we're going to retire another $17.1 million. So within 5 years of this, that debt service will be absorbed by the debt that we're retiring. So the tax impact will be greatly reduced. This is an opportune time to look at doing this as we're retiring debt. The best practice would be retiring debt and adding new debt. And so it's a wash. I don't think we have that opportunity to wait 5 years or 6 years. But so right now is a favorable time, in my opinion, based on the numbers that I've got, that we should really look at this moving forward, that it would have, even though there's a tax impact, it could be greatly reduced just by the circumstance that we're in right now. And that's important to note, that we're retiring $27 million of debt in the next 5 years.
As far as opening up this Pandora box, I think it would be the biggest mistake we could make. You know, to get things to fit in here, look through the electrical. I'm glad it's not in my house. Do it now, do it right, and do it new. This building was wonderful as a school. Kids went here, but for the purpose that we need going forward. Technology And I think of the electrical, which is a big part. I would really like to see a new building. I'm not for, jimmying this thing around to fit things in. Bushy School was wonderful as a school. As a police department, what can I say? Not the men, the building, let's get that straight.
I will just note very quickly, my mechanical engineer was very, had a lot of praise for the character of that existing building. We all agree that, once upon a time, it was a really wonderful building. But unfortunately, time has not treated it well.
Gary?
I think, the numbers are startling. I won't say shocking, but they're startling. But having been involved in the engagement process in Tectum, it's clear to me that we have people before us right now that have a strong depth of experience in these kinds of projects. And what that experience is telling us is that we don't have a police station.
We don't even have a
That's what
substation.
it says to me, is that we need everything. We're not almost a police, we don't have one today. We're making use of the building to house an operation. We don't really have a police facility today that should be considered a modern facility for a town like ours. And the extent to which it would cost to renovate it just underscores that. That, we can't kid ourselves about this. We've got a real challenge that needs to be met. Some of the timing as to finance and such is excellent to look at. But I would suggest that, this is great information, and I certainly value the opportunity to hear it and encourage it to continue to be looked at to try to find the right path forward. But the issue can't be we're going to stay where we are with what we have. We have to move forward. And I also point out that I was looking at the chart as Councilor Alice was with the simple size building. If you look at the numbers for I think the Cumberland facility, it's very recent. We're looking at, the numbers aren't crazy, I guess. There's a good base to look at. A very recent project of similar size that puts us in these square foot costs. Now, obviously, I haven't been to the Cumberland facility, but those are the kinds of things we need to maybe look at a little more deeply to get an understanding, to understand the validity of these numbers and face the fact. The question may be simply, when do we do it? Thank you.
If I may add.
Yep.
I know we talked about estimating and kind of cost, ensuring that we're kind of touching base on the cost throughout the process. Just to clarify, in the following design phases, there would probably be 2 to 3 additional estimates done at each of those milestones, where the same estimator would be looking at the project in greater detail, looking at the current construction conditions to the same point of construction, but that would also help us refine and continue to modify the financial analysis.
Right, just because I pointed out the fact that it's a boatload of money, it doesn't mean I'm against it. I'm just making the point that it's a boatload of money.
Absolutely.
No, but the reality is, it is a lot of money.
Right.
You can't shy away from it. It is a lot of money. It is a big investment that the town would make. It was quoted in the paper today. I'm not shy about it. I think this is the move we need to make. We need to create and build a brand-new police facility that's up to current standards, at least. And one thing that may help us out is, we need to start looking now and sitting down with our congressional delegation and talk about these $1 trillion of infrastructure money that they're dumping into everything, and how can we get some of it? I think it's important that we sit down with
Yeah.
Senator Reid and Senator Whitehouse and Representative, what's his name now? I'm drawing a blank.
Bailey?
Cicilline,
Cicilline,
and sit down with these guys and say, hey, what can we get out of this? You know, it doesn't sound like, in the grand scheme of the thing, $3.5 trillion, if we got $2 or $3 million, it's nothing. For us, though, that's a lot. That would be a lot. And there has to be programs out there. This, to me, fits into the infrastructure. Building a brand-new building is infrastructure. And I don't know how many of you have been in that building. I've been in it too many times, not for the wrong reasons. But the comments that we've made is that if you really want a new police station, the chief needs to bring half the town through there.
Oh, God.
Because once they see it, they'll
Wouldn't
understand.
last.
And it is that bad, that you're going to the basement and you're on 3 different levels. It's not even on one level like in your house. It's on 3
It's
different
shocking.
levels.
It's
It's on 3
shocking.
different levels. We have officers that have to walk through there and duck because of low ceiling levels. And if we stay with a renovation project on this thing, you didn't change any of that. The existing building doesn't change. And that's important to know, that you're still gonna have 10-foot corridors, you're gonna have a wood frame building, you're gonna have low ceilings, and that creates some of your costs, some of your driving costs in a thing.
Yeah, just, you know, to Gary's point and to your point, I'll tell you a quick scenario. Way back in 1990, when I was a brand-new trooper, we had a very old barracks. They were built in 1925, they never did a thing. And we dropped a prisoner off at Cranston Police. This is 1990. Drove around the back of the building, sally port opened up, cop pulls in, secure your weapon, you know, bring the guy in, processing room, cell block area, you know that, right? I mean, this is 1990, and that building in 1990 was light years ahead of the building that we have now. And we'd be lucky to have that building. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now if we had that building in 1990. Cranston has since leveled that building because they wanted a modern police station. So it goes to show you that, I mean, we're so far behind on this. This is not a police station, I agree. I've always said that. But it's a school. That's all it is. And it was a big step forward because we went from the basement of Town Hall to the
Yes.
school, so it seemed like a great thing at the time.
If you haven't lived
But-
around here, John, it's, oh my God, I think my bathroom's bigger, and I have a 100-year-old house. It was unbelievable. The mold, we lost a lot of data that was stored down there. And you came in, there was only 2 rooms to it, I think, in a cell somewhere. Thank God I never saw that, but penny wise and pound foolish. This should have been done a long time ago. But
Well,
everything's going up, and the people that work so hard in this committee, I really thank you for what you put forth. I think you were so realistic about everything. And I think we should get something new and look for you again for guidance to get it done correctly. And thank you, really. I know it took a lot of time, family and everything else.
It's unfortunate that the chief had to leave, but we relied a lot on all the statistics they keep, so there's an awful lot of things behind the scene, and if you have the time to look through tab 3, part of the things that the chief pointed out, even as late as today, is that compared to other communities, North Smithfield, I understood him to say, has more arrests than Cumberland. And Cumberland is, what, 3 times the size? And the other thing that drives it is calls for service. That relates to the staffing level you have to have. So I was curious, I drove by Situate Police Station, and then I looked at their website. They have 17 police personnel. North Smithfield has
25.
25, 26, because of the calls for service and the rest.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it doesn't take much to compare Situate, which is very rural and isolated, to a place like North Smithfield and what it's surrounded by, so. There was a lot of work that was done behind the scenes, looking at those statistics that are available for all the communities, so.
Paul Zelinski, you want?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Couple things, I just want to follow up on what Mr. Nordstrom said. We're blessed to have Route 146 and 146A, but when it comes a lot of calls for services because of the businesses and people using those roads. But what I wish to address is that there's a cost associated with health and safety. We have neither at that building. It's an unhealthy building, it's not safe for the people that work there, it's not safe for the people that enter into that building, for whatever reason they enter in. But long term, I think I've said this before, if I had a family member that had to go to work there every day, I'd be very, very concerned. So it's really a safety and health issue that we have to be focusing on, along with efficiencies and, I understand all that, but to me it comes down to safety and health.
Not just of the personnel that work there, though.
No, I said if
The-
everybody, yeah.
No, it's the custodial care, the prisoners that go in there, there's a huge liability to the town that comes with that as well.
I was trying to avoid saying that.
Well, I don't, because I think that needs to be said.
Well, if someone spent the night there and had a happy meal in the morning and went on their way, who knows what they could come back and say, I contracted this, or this is due to my visit 5 years ago to the police station. So I was trying to avoid making that statement, but anybody that enters that building, I think, could be at risk.
Ray, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just gotta say this. I don't think anybody's in dispute, they need a police station, I've said it for years. But I also don't want to be caught off guard of being short-sighted. We're talking about renovations or plans at Hallowell. Has any input been put into a public safety complex? I know the chief wants to stay here, this may not be the ideal place to stay. Calls for service may change down the road 5 years from now. You have 2 older fire stations that are gonna be looking for some need in the future. But we seem to be focusing on the police station. And I have no problem with the police station being knocked down and built. But I think that we've got to broaden our sight, that there's a need for a lot of stuff in this town. I don't even want to get into my building. That building should have been knocked down 10 years ago. But this town, the infrastructure of this town is horrendous. And it needs to be addressed. So don't just keep your eye on the ball, as they say, as the police station. You've got a lot of other projects that you're gonna be going up the bond for.
Jeff?
I just have a question on some of the cost estimating. Has the committee looked at what the escalation would be from 2023 to 2024, and then kind of build it out the next couple of years in case, the council decides not to go to bond, so we're shovels in the ground for 2023, just so then that way we're kind of aware of what we're looking at as we wait to make our decision. I think that would certainly be a helpful, at least a percentage-wise number. I know it fluctuates and it's really hard to pin down, I understand that, but just so we know if, we're looking at mid-2023, maybe, we're looking at mid-2024, mid-2025, just to get an idea of how much, or how quickly we need to act in some instances as far as the financial regards go. And the planning board on our side on that, we have been revising our comprehensive plan to include the police station in some way, shape, or form. We haven't, prior to when Tom left, we have it in draft form that, we have in the comp plan that the police station gets addressed, whether it be through renovation or new building. We felt as a planning board that was a major goal that we wanted to start to look at and identify. I've walked through that building quite a few times myself, similar with Mr. Vadney, not for any other reason, just to see what the facilities are like. So just know that that's going to be coming down the pipeline from the planning board perspective as well, because we have noticed that is one of the issues that we need to address in town.
I think we did talk with the folks from Tecton about escalating out, and with the market right now, with availability and the prices where they were sky high and everything, we were leery about going too far out, because we'd be putting out bad numbers potentially, that wouldn't carry through. So we put it where we were looking where a reasonable time frame. Because the reality of it is, you probably don't have 5 more years left in that building unless you do something drastic to it. That's the reality of it. That building, and you know, you may not want to hear this, that building is close to being condemnable. No one may want to hear that, but it's close to that point. You know, when Socket has got buildings fenced off, I mean, we've gone out now and partitioned off the front of the building so no one walks by. We kind of joked when we used to leave. We used to space ourselves every 8 feet so we wouldn't all get caught at once. But it's a reality of that building, that the building is that close to being condemnable. And we need to do something about it. And, you know, $1 million isn't what's gonna do it. And you don't have 5, 7, 8 years, 10 years to figure this out. At least I don't think so.
Oh, I agree with you. I just like to, look at, you know, in my profession, I've always been asked that question. So it's always something that's gonna come up, whether you're doing the library, the police station, town hall. So I wanna make sure that everybody here has that answer that we can provide to the folks that aren't here attending tonight.
David? Do we know that money that's left in the previous bond, about $1 million?
$1,260,000.
Can any of that money be used in planning of this project? Should this go forward, can it be used as surplus?
Let me address that. I think originally, when this bond came out, was there not talk that $600,000 should be allocated to the police department, but we've got $1,260,000. We still need to do some work on this building. In particular, this parking lot is a safety hazard right now. And it's getting worse. Every rainstorm we have, it gets worse. So I think the intent, going way back, and someone can correct me, but if there's like $600,000 that we bantered about to keep for the police station, absolutely. But I think we really need to address the parking lot and a few other little things remaining in this building. So at that point, I don't see what there'll be a council's decision to reallocate that money.
Originally, it had no limit on it, on what was sent at this building and the other building, they were tied together. When your council started the task force, and then we sat down and got new numbers, we actually put a number on what was needed to complete this building to the level that the council approved, and it was $900,000 for the police station, and we were carrying $500,000 of contingency. That's the number that we have left now, approximately $1.3, $1.2 million what's left. Any of those funds can be allocated for either one of the 2 projects with council approval. That's bond council's opinion. I have it in writing. That as long as it's the council made that decision on how to do it, and it's approved by the council, the plan is approved by the council, that's how the funds can be spent. But some has to be spent there, and we know that because we need to do asbestos abatement at the minimum, even if we tear the building down, so.
So the answer is yes, right? That's the answer.
It could be.
Yeah.
Another opportunity we have right now also is, there's been a demand in the past about the senior center, discussion about the senior center. I'm not looking to expand the potential bond that we have to have. And we're certainly using any room where the police station is currently. However, with elimination of the field here, and the potential of building a 5,000 square foot senior center on this location, advancing the bond total a little bit, would that provide some other needs that the town has, minimal needs? The senior center, I've heard so many things, so many times that people are looking at that.
Which is what you were saying, just if you.
Well, that's why I looked at different
Correct.
numbers,
Yeah.
if there were other things that we needed to bond at the same time.
Did you want to add something, Jeff?
I'd be wary of combining building projects on bonds, because I would not want to end up in the situation where we are now with this building and the police station. We're kind of in this situation because we are shortchanging one building over another. I would say, the Howell Review Committee has talked about looking at various grants, try to get funding in other ways before we even start thinking about bonding. projects in various towns throughout Rhode Island, and I would just hate to see, me personally, we end up in the same situation that we've ended up in the past with the Kendall Dean and the Bushy School. If we were to do the Bushy School and the Hallowell property, okay, who's gonna get shortchanged? And automatically, I know right now, the police station's gonna take priority, and then Hallowell's gonna suffer. So I would just like, I would, my opinion is just would be against that. We can put it in, on the, vote, as a vote at the same time, I have no problem with that, but I would say keep them separate.
Two separate ballot questions.
Yeah.
But the bigger issue in this Hollowell Bushy School fiasco that we're still dealing with is they borrowed the money before they knew what the cost was. That's a problem. We would know what the costs are before we go to bonding. So you could tie 2, 3 projects together if you really wanted to, and identify, this is for this, this is for this, this is for that. Global amount of money. Because if you start pitting one against the other, you can get one and lose one, and you need them all, really. And, but the key to that is, you need to know what the dollars are, and we didn't know it when we started this one.
Anyone else?
They actually borrowed the money without knowing what the cost was. Because the reality of it is, when we started looking at this, had they not borrowed the money, we would have put the brakes on everything, and you probably still wouldn't have a completed town hall. You'd still be where we were before. We wouldn't have even started the project.
Ray?
I think this is great information. I think this needs to continue, and I'm gonna keep banging that part about public safety complex, because I know in 5 years you're gonna be saying that. And it's a lot of revenue that can be taken our way by merging the fire department into the town. That's a discussion that the administration's gonna have to take. I know people talk about it, they all whisper behind everyone's back. I think you're gonna see it in the near future, and that's the opportunity you need to take. So, I think you gotta take the study, the information, keep it going, but I think that there's further things that have to be looked at here. There's a lot of stuff that has to be done in this town. And I just don't wanna see us get caught short, go out to bond with one question, and then 2 years later, we're still talking about the Hallowell situation, and now we're talking about fire stations. And then 3 or 4 years from there, when I'm long gone, we're talking about public works facilities.
Don't forget a school.
And if possibly a school, you can't forget that either. So I mean, I just wanna see us be short-sighted, that's all I'm saying. It has to, whether this task force or another one has to be put together, we gotta move forward. Before this even goes to a vote. It's just my opinion.
A lot to take in. Anybody have any other questions, comments, suggestions? David?
I think there's no better time than now to move forward with this project, based on being in this business and seeing the construction costs are going. There's no guarantee that the costs are gonna come down. And if they do level off for a short period of time, by the time this thing is ready to build, construction costs will be on the rise. I don't think we can afford to wait, and I think we have a responsibility to do the right thing in this town.
We definitely need a new police station. I mean, everybody agrees with that. There's no question. What's it gonna look like?
Are we going to vote on this?
Paul, no, there's no vote.
No vote?
No.
Good.
Paul, do you have anything to add or anything?
No, no, we think we accomplished what we wanted to do. And we're available to answer any questions, and if it comes to a vote, we'll be there, so.
Well, you guys did a great job.
Thank you very much.
Very informative. All right, so you want to close your meeting?
Take a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
We're adjourned.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.